in Cape Town. Mr. Naidu, thank you very much for your time. Before we get into the substance of the court application that you've brought forward here, let's talk about just how much money has the King made, and of course his trust, through these rental collections.
Good morning, colleague. Look, in the last financial year, it's reported that the Ingonyama Trust received over 100 million rands in rental from various sources of land in the last year, as I say. The Auditor General has raised concerns about the finances of the Ingonyama Trust, that they have not accounted for how that money has been spent or allocated. So it's a real concern. Over the last several years, it's quite possible that well over R500 million rands has been collected by the Trust in this manner by subjecting land that is in the custody of the Ingonyama Trust, by subjecting it to rentals, where previously for residential purposes and for schools and creches and the like, no such rental was payable in terms of customary law.
And who is this money collected from, Mr. Naidu?
Well, it's being collected from ordinary dwellers on the land that is in the custody of the Ingonyama Trust. In terms of the trust deed, that land is held for the benefit and for of the communities and people who reside on that land and who have resided on that land for centuries. And this attempt by the Ingonyama Trust now to try and dilute people's land rights, informal as they might be, from permissions to occupy to lease agreements, is what we are objecting to and what we are going to court over. And one of the reasons that we have resorted to litigation in this matter is that the Portfolio Committee in Parliament had sought to hold the Ingonyama Trust to account and asked them to cease this conversion of permissions to occupy to leasehold arrangements, and they flatly simply ignored Parliament, and we were therefore left with no option but to seek redress in the courts.
Lawson, we all know that the people who reside in rural settings, in the majority, these are poor people. What, yes, in your view, was the motive behind the cancellation of these permission to occupy agreements, that was back in 2007, and residents being forced to enter into 40-year lease agreements? What was the motive behind that?
Well, I think the Ingonyama Trust would be best placed to answer that question. Our suspicion is that it's to weaken land rights by historic dwellers of those pieces of land. It's also to seek to extract or to extort money from those people in the payment of rent for land, which under Zulu customary law they were not required to pay rent for that land. So it's really it is about raising funds for the Ingonyama Trust, and yet, as I said earlier, those funds are pretty much unaccounted for. So this is it also serves as a dilution of the rights of those current residents, because in terms of customary law, people held rights to that land in perpetuity rather than for a fixed-term 40-year lease, as is currently the case with many of those that have been converted.
So let's quickly get into the details of your application then, Mr. Naidu. Talk to us about who you represent, and at the core of your argument, what exactly is it that you want?
Well, there are three sets of applicants in this case. There's CASAC, there's the Rural Women's Network, and there are 7 individual applicants who are individual residents on the trust-controlled land in KwaZulu-Natal who have been negatively impacted by the conversion to leasehold arrangements, who provide affidavits and testimony to the fact that they were unaware of what it is they were signing. They were pretty much forced to sign these various agreements, which were in English only, and many of those applicants were unable to fully comprehend the nature of what they were signing and were not provided with adequate explanation. For example, being told that they were going to have to pay rent from here on in, a rental which varies to several thousand rands a year, which many of those indigent people cannot afford. So the primary focus of this litigation is to set aside those lease agreements that have been entered into, to stop the Ingonyama Trust from converting any more PTOs to lease agreements, and to refund any monies that may have been paid by these residents by the Ingonyama Trust back to them. So we really want to restore the status quo as it was before, and to ask government to ensure that these informal land rights that people hold at the moment be upgraded to registrable interests that can be registered with the Deeds Office going forward.
Lawson Naidu, we are out of time, but I've got to put This question to you very quickly. What happens to residents who do not comply with these lease agreements? I've been reading that they are being evicted. Does the King and his trust have the power to do that? And has he, by the way, filed his responding affidavit?
This is one of the main reasons for our objection to the lease agreements, because, as I said, it weakens rights under law. And in terms of those lease agreements, if people default on those rental payments, they are liable to be evicted from the land. There are other onerous conditions that are being imposed on people who reside on this land, such as the fact that once a lease is signed, they have to erect fences around their land within a period of 6 months. And if they fail to do so, they're liable to be evicted and find themselves homeless and landless. That's really why we've gone to court on this matter. We're waiting further directions from the court, and I'm sure in due course we will get a response from the Ingonyama Trust and the Trust Board and the other respondents that we cited in this matter.
Lawson Naidu, thank you very much for your time. He is the Executive Secretary of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution.